Imagine waking up one morning to discover that your country had a secret army that officially never existed, hidden beneath forests, buried inside mountains, and known only to a handful of people. It waited silently for a war that never came. The Second World War had ended, but peace brought little comfort. Across Europe, ruined cities slowly rebuilt while a new rivalry emerged between East and West. As the Soviet Union expanded its influence, many Western leaders feared another conflict might not be far away. Military planners believed that if Western Europe were ever invaded, conventional armies might not be enough. A new strategy began to take shape, one built not on open battlefields, but on secrecy, preparation, and resistance behind enemy lines. Drawing on lessons learned during World War II, secret stay-behind networks were organized in several European countries. Their mission was straightforward. If an occupation occurred, they would remain hidden, gather intelligence, sabotage enemy operations, and support future liberation. Across forests, mountains, and remote countryside, weapons, radios, and supplies were quietly hidden in carefully concealed caches. Most citizens never knew they existed, and many governments kept the programs known only to a small circle of officials. To those living ordinary lives, everything appeared normal. But beneath that appearance, clandestine preparations continued. Men and women were recruited, trained, and instructed to be ready for a war everyone hoped would never come. These networks operated under different names across Europe and were coordinated through Cold War planning structures. According to official accounts, their purpose was to prepare for the possibility of a Soviet occupation. Yet decades later, questions would emerge about whether some networks had taken on roles beyond their original mission. For years, their existence remained hidden from the public. Then, in the late 20th century, a criminal investigation in Italy would uncover documents that brought one of the Cold War's most secret programs into the light. The operation was known as Gladio. Across Western Europe, these secret networks quietly expanded. Each country gave them a different name, but they all shared one purpose: to survive if their nation fell. Recruitment was selective. Those chosen were expected to remain silent for years, perhaps for the rest of their lives. Training focused on survival, communication, and operating independently if normal command structures disappeared. Secrecy was essential. Many recruits were expected to tell no one, not even those closest to them. Years turned into decades. The invasion everyone had prepared for never came. Beneath forests, inside mountains, and under quiet villages, hidden caches remained untouched as Europe moved on. If history had taken a different path, Operation Gladio might have remained an obscure Cold War contingency plan known only to a handful of officials. But while the hidden networks waited in silence, Italy was entering one of the most turbulent periods in its modern history. Political divisions deepened, demonstrations grew larger, clashes became more frequent. Across the country, hope slowly gave way to uncertainty. On the afternoon of December 12, 1969, an ordinary banking day in Milan became one of the darkest moments in modern Italian history. At 4:37 p.m., a powerful bomb exploded inside the National Agrarian Bank in Piazza Fontana. 17 people were killed, and dozens more were injured. Italy was in shock. Early suspicion quickly focused on left-wing extremists, and arrests followed. But in the years ahead, investigators and courts would revisit key parts of that initial narrative. The violence did not end. Throughout the 1970s, Italy experienced bombings, kidnappings, assassinations, and political violence carried out by different extremist groups. Historians remember this turbulent period as the years of Lead. Then came a case that, at first, appeared straightforward. On the evening of 31st May 1972, an anonymous phone call reported an abandoned Fiat 500 in the village of Petiano. 3 Carabinieri officers arrived to investigate. One officer carefully lifted the bonnet. A hidden bomb detonated instantly. The explosion killed all 3 Carabinieri officers. Within hours, investigators focused on left-wing extremists. For many, the case seemed solved almost as quickly as it had begun. The investigation moved quickly. Early conclusions pointed toward the Red Brigades. Reports were filed, suspects were pursued, and for years the official account remained largely unchallenged. More than a decade later, one man began asking a simple question: what if the original investigation had missed something? Casson reviewed every document, every witness statement, and every forensic report. Gradually, he discovered inconsistencies that raised difficult questions about the original investigation. The more Casson examined the evidence, the less the original conclusion made sense. According to his investigation, key forensic findings had been mishandled, and some evidence had even been deliberately falsified. The investigation eventually led to Vincenzo Vinciguerra, a member of the far-right extremist group Ordine Nuovo. During legal proceedings, he admitted responsibility for the Petiano bombing, but his testimony raised questions far beyond a single attack. As investigators followed new leads, the case expanded beyond one bombing. Requests were made to examine classified records held by Italy's military intelligence service. Behind those doors lay information that had remained hidden for decades. Inside the archives, one code name appeared repeatedly in classified documents. It was a name unfamiliar to most of the public: Gladio. As Judge Felice Casson's investigation expanded, requests were made to examine classified military intelligence records. Those files would eventually lead to one of Italy's most closely guarded Cold War secrets. On October 24, 1990, Italian Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti publicly acknowledged the existence of Operation Gladio before Parliament. After decades of secrecy, the network was no longer officially denied. The announcement stunned Europe. Newspapers across the continent carried the story, and governments faced questions about their own stay-behind networks. Parliamentary investigations followed in Italy, Belgium, and Switzerland. At the same time, US officials maintained that the stay-behind networks had been created as a defensive measure against a possible Soviet invasion, rejecting claims that the program had been intended for domestic terrorism. As investigations continued, it became clear that Italy was not alone. Similar stay-behind networks were acknowledged or investigated in several Western European countries, though each had its own structure, history, and level of official disclosure. Some parliamentary inquiries criticised the lack of democratic oversight surrounding these secret organisations. Meanwhile, NATO and US officials continued to describe the networks as defensive preparations for a possible Soviet occupation, rejecting claims that they had been created to direct terrorism. Even today, historians continue to examine Operation Gladio. Some aspects are well documented through official records and court findings. Other claims remain debated, reminding us that the Cold War still contains unanswered questions. Whether viewed as a necessary Cold War contingency or as a program whose legacy remains deeply controversial, Operation Gladio continues to shape historical debate. Its story reminds us that some of the most significant chapters of history remained hidden for decades before reaching the public. The revelations did not stop in Italy. As journalists and investigators looked deeper, similar stay-behind networks came to light in other European countries. Each had its own code name, its own command structure, and its own history. Belgium launched a parliamentary investigation after the existence of its stay-behind network became public. The inquiry confirmed that secret structures had existed and led to reforms in intelligence oversight, while questions about some violent events remained the subject of continuing debate. In Switzerland, investigators uncovered P26, a secret stay-behind organisation that operated outside public awareness. Although Switzerland was neutral during the Cold War, the discovery sparked a national debate about oversight and secrecy. Other countries acknowledged similar preparations, each shaped by its own political circumstances and security concerns. The names differed, but the central idea remained the same. If invasion came, someone would remain behind. The revelations sparked intense debate across Europe. In November 1990, the European Parliament adopted a resolution expressing concern that these clandestine networks had operated outside normal democratic oversight and called on member states to investigate and dismantle any remaining structures. Governments responded differently. Some acknowledged their stay-behind organisations and introduced new oversight measures. Others maintained that the networks had always been intended solely as a defensive precaution against a possible Soviet invasion. Over the years, additional documents became public. Declassified records confirmed aspects of the stay-behind system, including its organisation in several countries. At the same time, historians continued debating the extent to which different networks were connected to later political violence. Today, Operation Gladio remains one of the most discussed intelligence stories of the Cold War. Some conclusions are supported by official records, judicial findings, and parliamentary inquiries. Other claims continue to be debated, reminding us how difficult it can be to separate established fact from unresolved questions. Operation Gladio emerged from a time of genuine fear. After the Second World War, many leaders believed another conflict in Europe was possible. Secret preparations, hidden caches, and clandestine networks were seen by some as necessary insurance against invasion. Yet the secrecy surrounding these networks also raised difficult questions. How much should governments conceal in the name of security? And who should oversee operations hidden from public view? For historians, Operation Gladio remains both a documented Cold War program and a subject of continuing debate. Official records, court cases, and parliamentary inquiries established some facts. Other questions remain unresolved. Perhaps that is why Operation Gladio continues to fascinate people today. It sits at the intersection of history, intelligence, politics, and secrecy, reminding us that some chapters of the past remain far more complex than they first appear. By the early 1990s, one fact was no longer in dispute. Secret stay-behind networks had existed in multiple European countries during the Cold War. Their existence had been confirmed through official disclosures, parliamentary inquiries, and declassified records. Other questions remain more difficult. Historians continue to debate the extent of coordination between different national networks and the degree of responsibility for specific acts of political violence. The available evidence does not answer every question. The story of Operation Gladio reminds us that history is rarely divided into simple heroes and villains. Governments, intelligence agencies, judges, journalists, and historians all became part of a much larger story that continues to be examined today. Whether you see Operation Gladio as a necessary Cold War contingency, a cautionary tale about secrecy, or something in between, it continues to provoke discussion more than 3 decades after its public disclosure. More than 3 decades after its public disclosure, Operation Gladio remains one of the most extensively discussed intelligence programs of the Cold War. It continues to be examined through newly released documents, historical research, and public debate. The Cold War officially ended decades ago, but many of its decisions, alliances, and covert operations still shape the questions historians ask today. History is not only about what happened, it is also about how we investigate the past, evaluate evidence, and recognize the difference between documented facts and unresolved questions. Perhaps that is the true legacy of Operation Gladio, not simply the existence of a secret network, but the reminder that democratic societies continue to debate how secrecy, accountability, and national security should be balanced. From the ashes of World War II to the final years of the Cold War, Operation Gladio traveled through decades of fear, secrecy, and political change. What began as a hidden defense plan became one of the most debated intelligence stories of the 20th century. The historical record reveals a complicated picture. Secret networks existed. Governments made difficult decisions during a dangerous era. Investigations uncovered both confirmed facts and unanswered questions. Understanding history means examining evidence carefully, not simply accepting the easiest explanation. More than 30 years after Gladio was revealed, its story continues to raise important questions about secrecy, power, and accountability. Because history is not only about the events that happened, it is also about the questions those events leave behind. Operation Gladio remains a reminder that some of history's most important stories are hidden not because they never happened, but because they happened in the shadows. The search for truth continues,